At its early access, Baldur's Gate 3 has 6 starter classes available, and classes matter a lot more than they did in Larian's previous RPG, Divinity Original Sin 2. But it's also not as simple as choosing your virtual job either, as the Baldur's Gate 3 character creator follows a lot of the same rules as classic Dungeons & Dragons. Your character's race and the abilities that go alongside your bloodline also play a huge part in your build. So I thought I'd go through some of the most effective combinations for each class and race combo, from the start of the game up until your 3rd level, for all those out there who want to min-max their experience. For fighters, strength and constitution are the stats to pay most attention to. Starting as a Githyanki is an okay choice as they have that +2 strength, but I think the best choice is to go for the Shield Dwarf, as they also have a +2 constitution modifier on top of their strength. Constitution being the stat that affects health, so by combining both of those you have an effective frontline melee character who can also soak up a bit of damage. But also think about what weapons you want to start with. Dwarves obviously favour axes and hammers, while Gith are more effective with swords. The strength modifier is also going to get you into melee combat more effectively, as it's the strength stat that affects how far you can jump, which is a great tactic to get you in and out of combat. The first level up is when you can start to really build your fighter around a role, as this is when you can start taking your traits. Do you want to focus on protection, great weapons, dual wielding, etc.? Personally, if I want to deal damage, I will go for the dual wielding option, as it will allow you to diversify the damage output between different weapon types and status effects. If you want a tank to take the damage away from your squishier allies, then I recommend going down the protection route and start planning ahead to add some shield proficiencies. This level up will also get you an action surge, giving you an extra action with every use, so be ready for those double hits. And on your next level up, when you hit level 3, you get to pick between Battlemaster or Eldritch Knight. Going the Eldritch Knight route basically makes you a battle mage, but with the current roster you're already likely to have some spellcasters in party, so I recommend keeping the focus on melee. That's where the Battlemaster option excels with some really good passives. My advice is to swap out pushing attacks and take Riposte instead. Riposte grants you the ability to counterattack, which can be super effective with 2 weapon fighting styles, and the downside to pushing attack is that it has a chance to push enemies away. Firstly, if you're the tank, you want the enemies near you, and secondly, it means you lose out on the possibility of a reactionary attack if the enemy chooses to flee away from you. Rangers have the option to choose their favoured enemy, and an option for their Natural Explorer perk. A lot of this feels like it will be more useful beyond the Act 1, which is what's included in Early Access. Personally, I think players should either go for Magebreaker, which gives access to True Strike cantrip, and some experience in Arcana. For the second option, I chose Beast Tamer because it allows you to take on a familiar. These are pretty small and squishy, but it can be a good distraction for enemies, as well as having some fairly decent status effects like poison or blindness. Be aware though, at level 3 this is going to be pretty much completely replaced by something far better. One strong choice for race is Wood Elf for their high dexterity and fleet of foot abilities, but I think the better option if you want to play that kind of stealth sniper role is the Lightfoot Halfling, as they have high dexterity, are stealthy, and have the race ability of Lucky, which allows them to reroll all 1s, which means critical fails will be an extremely rare sight for you. Your first level up should be focused on archery, as the rest of your options here are going to be done much better by pretty much any other party member you're taking with you. As for spells, the most useful is going to be Ensnaring Strike, keeping enemies at a distance while you do some damage, and my other option of choice is Speak with Animals, because honestly, with all the story potential you get from that ability, it should be a no-brainer to pick whenever you have the option. And for the second level up, the best ability to pick is Beastmaster. Now this is going to allow you to summon larger animal companions like bears and wolves into combat. The options this gives you are great, as the summons are another damage dealer with its own unique ability, and it's another massive entity to soak up damage for essentially free, helping ensure the main party members stay healthy. Warlock is my favourite class. It has such a variety of options and weird spells, I think everyone should build one at least once. Now for Warlocks, the primary stat to pay attention to is Charisma, as this is what they're going to use to cast spells, but high Charisma is also going to be super helpful when interacting with NPCs outside of combat. Tieflings and Half-Elves both have that +2 Charisma stat, but as much as I love Tieflings, I think Half-Elf is a stronger option, as they also get an extra point to put into 2 other stats of their choice, further helping diversify your Warlock. You're going to have fewer spell slots as a Warlock, so it's worth thinking about how you're going to rely on your cantrips and other basic weaponry. When it comes to your packs, you have 2 options. You could opt into the Great Old One if you want battlefield control and disables, but if you want more melee utility, the Fiend will be a better choice. Personally, I went the Strange Cthulhu style route. As for cantrips, I think the only really essential one is Eldritch Blast. It's basically going to be your bread and butter for ranged damage, and the more you level up, the more options you have to upgrade it. Dissonant Whispers and Hideous Laughter are both great options for burst damage and disabling your enemies for a few turns. And at your first level up, you'll notice there are a lot of options that relate to things you already have. I recommend at least taking Agonizing Blast to upgrade the damage of Eldritch Blast, as like I said, you're going to be using that ability a lot. And Beast Speech again because it lets you talk to animals, and that's never not been great. Spell choice will depend on how you've built so far, whether you're going to focus on melee, range, damage, or control. Charm Person will help out here and there in battle against humanoids, but for an option that's pretty much always usable, taking the Hex enchantment as a bonus will make the rest of your attacks sting that little bit more. Level 3 grants access to Pact of the Chain, another summoning ability, although rather than the normal familiars, you get to pick from imps or quasids. Much more powerful with much more potent poisons than your average familiars. And for my final spell choice, I'd say either Misty Step for keeping you on the high ground, or if you feel like you need a little AoE, Shatter is a great option. But again, when it comes to spells, it is really going to be down to how you've played that character so far. Rogues feel like one of the classes that aren't quite there yet when it comes to what abilities and options are available to you, but if you're playing one, then I think taking Drow as your race is going to give you the most benefits, as they both have +2 in dexterity, decent weapon proficiencies, and are the absolute best at seeing in the dark, which is going to be great for all the skulking around and backstabbing you're likely to do. One thing you should bear in mind is that you need to be getting behind enemies as much as possible to take advantage of sneak attacks. Your first level up is going to help you there, as it's going to allow you to take dash as a bonus action, meaning you can rush behind an enemy and still have the ability to plunge your daggers in. If you want to mix things up, come level 3 you can add some spellcasting by taking Arcane Trickster, but again, as you're likely to have a spellcaster or two already at this point, I say keep to what you know and go for the Thief option and continue to focus on stabbing spines. The Thief choice will also mean you take less fall damage if you're knocked from your high ground hiding spots, but Fast Hands is the biggest bonus as it gives you an extra bonus action. So that's either an extra dash or more opportunities to attack with your offhand weapon. Just remember to stay mobile and keep some melee backup or take buffs from your mages, as you're going to be a great damage dealer, but awfully squishy. With other spells wizards have as options, an exact build won't be that helpful, but I can tell you what's going to give you the best head start. Unlike every other class and race combo, there's nothing that will give you a +2 intelligence trait, which is the wizard spellcasting stat of choice. Going human is fine as you get a few other stat boosts, but personally I think the extra cantrip you get from going high elf is much more appealing. Also, elves are immune from being charmed or put to sleep, so this will ensure you can keep your spellcaster slinging lightning. And also, a bit of elven dexterity for dodging attacks never hurt anyone. I opted to swap out Grease and Fog for Thunder Wave to push away any bad guys melee rushing me, and Magic Missile as it's an extremely reliable and consistent damage dealer for the early game. First level up is basically a choice between if you're looking to protect yourself or deal some damage. Evocation spells focus elemental energy into powerful attacks and enchantments, and Abjuration spells summon wards, banish enemies, and nullify magic. Evocation means you'll lose out on some of the arcade ward abilities and have to be a bit more precious with your spell slots, but you do get the Sculpt Spells passive, meaning that your allies won't take damage from all your spell flinging, so you can fire away with Burning Hands with a bit more reckless abandon. Like I said, a full build guide isn't going to help much for wizards, especially when they have 25 spells to choose from at level 3, so what you pick here is likely just going to be based on what you've enjoyed so far. It is worth noting though that even if a spell isn't in this list, you can always pay to learn it later if you find a spell scroll and a handful of gold. Although I must say again, for Misty Step, having that is always a bonus. Keeps you on the high ground and away from most of the danger. I think the best bet if you're going to play Cleric is to focus on Life Domain. This is going to make you an extremely powerful healer and dealer of buffs. Also, if you take Shadowheart along with you, she's a cleric of the opposite school, so you'd already be covered anyway. I opted to play as Wood Elf as it gave me the biggest boost to Wisdom, one of the most important stats for clerics, which is going to be very helpful in the early game as you start out with a very powerful spell and cantrip combo, Guiding Bolt and Sacred Flame. The extra stats are best served in Constitution and Dexterity, especially if you're going with that melee shield build that is so common with clerics. These stats are just going to serve you that much better if you're a frontline battle party member. The progression over both levels is pretty linear. Your focus should just be on buffs, protection spells, and healing, as the other companions are going to be pretty lacking in that department. By level 3, you should be able to keep everyone topped up with HP via Cure Wounds, Aid, Preserve Life, and the Prayer of Healing. And with the slots you have spare, taking spells like Halt and Hold Person will keep foes at bay, giving you a turn to dish out some heals. Those are my choices for the most meta or min-maxed builds to start you off in Baldur's Gate 3. But honestly though, the character you should build is the one you most want to play. There is absolutely nothing wrong with playing a Githyanki cleric, a dwarven mage, or a human fighter. It's a role-playing game with such depth and creativity that despite this build guide, the best piece of advice I can give you is to experiment and be creative. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button and let me know your favourite class builds in Baldur's Gate 3, and what classes and races do you hope Larian adds next. Until the next video, you can find me on Twitter @IrregularDave, and I'll catch you in the next one.